how do you stop bleeding? You know, direct pressure, right? Well, how do I tell if it's a bad cut where it's going to kill somebody, or it's something that's like, oh, that's not so bad, they're okay. We can just put direct pressure on it and hopefully it'll stop. And so it literally looks like squirting. If you've never seen that, probably YouTube it. It looks pretty heinous, and you'll know it when you see it. That is the one where you are out in the trail and you see that happening, and you know right away two things. One, we have to stop that, and two, we have to get that person out as soon as we can. Because even if you stop it, you don't know how much they've lost in the meantime, and it's going to take you time to stop that bleeding. So basically the first thing you're going to do is direct pressure. So if it's a limb, from the shoulder down to the end of your hand there, and then from your hips down to your feet, you're going to hold direct pressure with a gloved hand or a hand, a shirt, whatever you got to stop the bleeding, and you're going to basically squeeze it as hard as you can. And so that person is probably not going to be calm and happy and saying, oh, thank you. This is much better. I appreciate you grabbing my arm. Everything's going to be fine. They're going to be panicked. They're going to be in pain. And as you squeeze down on that cut, if you've ever hurt yourself and then squeezed on it, it doesn't feel good. Especially a kid or somebody maybe who's intoxicated and they're not sitting still. So you got to do the best you can and grab onto them and hold that down. If the direct pressure doesn't stop with a gauze bandage, or I guess I probably shouldn't rip this apart. Yeah, he'll get upset with me if I start ripping his kits apart. We'll use this.
They have all the padding.
So here's a perfect little Olays. We'll use this Olays, okay? You can pull this out of here, or you can take this and you can put it here. We'll just use your arm. And you're basically gonna, well, hold on.
Go for it.
Are you ready?
I trust you.
Let's get real. You're gonna grab them firm, and you're gonna push down here and you're gonna hold them, okay? Now, if you can talk to them, sometimes you can grab them and you can hold them like this. That gives you a little bit of control of them, okay? And you're able to talk to them and calm them down. One of the best things you can do is not freak out. If you're elevated, they're gonna be elevated. If you're calm, your voice can help calm them down, okay? And you're gonna talk to them, slow them down. Hey, I know you're hurt. We're gonna put pressure on this. We're gonna stop this bleeding. You're gonna be all right, just hang on. And you're gonna press down. Now, you're watching this because you wanna see, is that bright red blood stopping? Because if it's not, that direct pressure, it may not be working, okay? And so you can move on to a pressure dressing, which is basically this, is an ace bandage. Everybody's familiar with an ace bandage, right? Stretchy. And you can put it on there. The cool thing about these Olays is it doesn't unroll. Everybody try to get an ace bandage open and it just, and you're like, ah. Perfect timing, thank you. I'm glad that happened. But you're gonna put the direct pressure on there and then you're gonna wrap it really tight, okay? No, it's okay. And you're basically gonna wrap it around really tight.
How much time between it is working to next step? A minute or 30 seconds?
I would say a good minute, unless it's really pouring through. If I take this and I put it on her and all of a sudden it's just instant and it's soaking through and I can see the blood coming out of it, then honestly, I wouldn't even mess with a pressure dressing. I would go directly to a tourniquet. Okay, everybody's afraid of these. And for good reason. They said for a long time, don't ever put a tourniquet on somebody, basically kiss their limb goodbye if you do that. Well, that's not the case. Unfortunately and fortunately, for all the wars that we've had overseas, they've had a lot of studies with this. And they found that you could put a tourniquet on, leave it on for hours, and they can reperfuse the limb, and then they can save that person. The thing is this is a commercial tourniquet, so it's been tested. It's not supposed to break on you, and it's wide enough where it's not going to impinge on somebody's nerve. And so if you put, let's say, something skinny like a RAS tourniquet or a cord, a paracord or something around somebody, if that's all you got, use it because you want to save them, right? But there's a good chance that when you cut off that nerve and you have nerve damage, they're going to end up taking that anyways. It's going to go. But if you use a commercial tourniquet, save their life, save their limb, okay? So the tourniquets go only here and here, and if you don't like somebody here, that's your decision. Do you have a question?
You said width is the width that prevents from.
Yeah, so it spreads out the actual point of impact. Yeah, and it distributes that and kind of squeezes it together. And the goal is think of your arteries are a tube, right? It's just a tube. And your goal is to squish that tube and to stop it. Okay, so when you're bleeding, what happens is your body goes, oh, we're losing a lot of blood, and your vessel may clench up for a second and try to stop it. It's eventually going to relax. All of your vessels are basically a bunch of sphincter muscles. It's just if you're familiar with that muscle, we're all full of them. So it's fortunate and unfortunate, but it's constantly regulating your blood pressure. And so the body's going to try to do that, and it's going to try to save itself. But eventually it's going to get tired, it's going to relax, everything's going to pour out. As your blood pours out, it's like a domino effect. You get cold. As you get cold, then your blood clotting factor just dumps. And now all of a sudden you were able to clot, and you can't, which we'll talk more about that later. But as far as the steps go and the basic steps, it's direct pressure. I think I'm making some headway here. It's slowing down. Let's go ahead and wrap it. And you wrap it, and let's say 20, 30 minutes later, you notice that it's completely full. But it took that long. Okay, so this is not a crazy amount of blood that's pouring out, like an arterial bleed per se, that's uncontrolled. We are getting this under control. Instead of unwrapping that and getting new gauze, don't ever take it off. Just put more on it and tighten it down more. And if it continues to bleed through, then you can go ahead and throw that tourniquet on. Okay? But if it is that bright red spurting blood, honestly for me, I'm gonna put direct pressure on it, and I'm gonna know it's probably not gonna stop it. You know, I'm gonna be thinking tourniquet right away. And that's really what all the recommendations from all the different tragedies have come out of. That's what they found, is throw the tourniquet on early. And what you'll find is, we put this on an arm, most of the time it's gonna work. And we can do that later. I have an hour to talk to you all about this stuff. And afterwards I'll hang out and talk to you and answer any questions, and we can put it on, take it off, whatever you wanna do. But when you go to put it on a leg, a lot of times one's not gonna work. And so what are you gonna do? Put a second one below it. Put a second one down. And that's okay, it's totally fine. In fact, it's encouraged, okay? And it's gonna hurt. And honestly, if somebody's intoxicated or they've lost a lot of blood and they get confused and they're wanting to fight you, don't fight them. You know, unless they're your family and you got enough people to hold them down, and you're like, I love you, I'm doing this, but if it's just some random person, you know, and you don't know what you're dealing with, and they start fighting you, I wouldn't fight them, because what's gonna happen? They're gonna pass out real quick. And that's what I'm gonna tell them. Hey, you can let me help you, or I'm gonna wait till you pass out, because then you're not gonna fight me and you can actually help them, and you're not gonna get in trouble for that either, okay? And we'll talk about that some more too. So let's pass these tourniquets around. This is a cat tourniquet. That's a child. Yeah. So different types of tourniquets, you can pass those around.
The orange one is a child tourniquet. The orange one that's floating around. All the rest are adult.
Bless you. It's different because it's smaller, and if you notice, actually you got a couple kids right there. If you go to put an adult tourniquet on, you go to tighten it down, the windlass, the bar, when you try to twist it, it's actually not gonna clamp down on them because they're too small. And so they do have different size ones. You can also use something that's called a SWAT T, and it's basically a big old rubber band, and it works great. But the goal is to stop the bleeding as fast as you can. And so that's our step one, stop the bleeding. We're gonna put tourniquets on limbs, arms and legs, and we're gonna pack wounds if we have to. But as far as packing wounds go, you're gonna use gauze. You can use this gauze out of the Olays. You can actually use Acrylex. And if you see how it's kind of meshed there, they do that for a reason. Their goal is to get your body to do its job, which is to clot. That's why this is meshed here. And so they have special gauze out there that actually has an organic compound in it that will help the clotting factor, so they say. And Travis actually has that in some of his other law enforcement kits and some other kits. But you can take this gauze and you can pack a wound. And what does pack a wound mean? Well, it's, yeah, I'm not gonna give you a wound. Yeah, we could do that too. But we got a hole here, and you're gonna pack what is called a junction, okay? And so let's say you have an injury here in your armpit, an injury in your groin. How are you gonna put a tourniquet here or here? You're not. And so how do you stop that bleeding? And so one of the ways we can do it, we can pack her arm here. We'll just go over this real quick, is basically once you locate it, I would encourage you to put gloves on, which are located in a kit. And the goal is to not shove your finger in there right away. Okay, you got to talk to these people and tell them what's going to happen, because they're probably going to pull away from you. And depending upon what type of injury it is, there may be a bone shard in there. Okay, and so now you've stuck your finger and you jammed it in there, and there's a bone shard in there. So don't just be sticking your fingers in super fast, trying to be a savior right away like that. You're going to end up hurting yourself. And so basically, you're going to find the hole and you're going to shove it in there, and that's all you're doing. And you're going to reach in there and you'll actually feel it. You'll feel the blood spurting. Okay, there it is. And then you're just going to pack down. And you're going to keep that pressure on there, and you're going to pack down as much as you can into that hole. And then you're going to hold it there, and you're going to hold it down. If you're using this, for the next 15 minutes, you're going to be holding pressure, and then you're going to wrap it in a pressure dressing. Okay. If you've got the special fancy bandages, they say 5 minutes. And how you know that it works is because when you go to take your glove off, it actually clotted your glove to them, and you're probably going to leave your gloves. And so when there's stuff comes into the trauma bag and the gloves are on, you know that clotted and that worked. And that's how long they held it on. Okay. Again, the tourniquet and the wound packing is not a fun thing. That person's going to be very upset. And quite honestly, I would probably wait for them to pass out with the wound packing, because they're probably not going to let you shove gauze into them. They might, but you may have to wait for them to pass out, because I don't want to get punched in the face while I'm trying to do this. It's not going to help anybody, right? But knowing, like, okay, what do I have to do? I've got to stop the bleeding, I've got to get help, and we've got to get this person out of here. What do I have in my arsenal to do that? Do you have this kit? Are you backpacking and you have a t-shirt? Did you just grab a couple of gauze? I encourage you to look and see what you have on you when you go out and say, how can I use this for more than one purpose? The nice thing is with that, everything's good to go. You got what you need in there. And now you all have one, which is fantastic. But that's really it as far as the tourniquet. We'll go over putting it on. Let's do that now. And then we'll talk about, we already talked about the wound packing. Hopefully you'll never have to do that. But again, tourniquets on limbs, and then junction is going to be your wound packing. So cat tourniquet, you're going to pull this as tight as you can. So if the wound is here, obviously I'm not going to go below it. I need to go above it. And so this is going to be able to get up as high as I can, and it's going to be here, 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 anything distal to it or below it, okay? Now the old way they used to talk about tourniquets, and if you've ever heard of how to put a tourniquet on, well, if it's below the elbow, don't go above the elbow, because then they're going to take their arm off there. If you don't do this every day, and I've been doing this for a while and I don't do this every day, even though, I've taught it a few times, the reality is when your adrenaline dumps, you're not going to think straight. Put it above the wound and get it tight. How do I know it works? The bleeding stops. That's it. Super simple. Keep it simple. Don't get complicated. We're not doctors. We're not trauma surgeons. Keep the blood in the body. Get him to the hospital. That's all you got to do. Nice and tight. It's uncomfortable. Okay. I know it doesn't feel good. Okay. You're going to tighten that down, and this part right here actually comes out like this, okay? And this is called your windlass. Doesn't matter if you know what it's called, the stick thingy, the pen, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. You can wrap this through it again, and to keep it from getting ripped off. That's why that's important to hold that down, okay? Again, you are going to be, your hands are probably going to be shaking, okay? Slow yourself down, high and tight, that's all you got to remember, and you're going to turn this down like this, okay? All right, I'm not going to go any further. I know I can because you're tough, but I'm not going to do that to you. All right, and you're going to lock it in here, okay?
I don't have a pulse anymore.
So the goal is to stop bleeding, so does she have a pulse or not, Let's see. I'm not, yeah, I don't feel anything.
You killed her.
I killed this arm. So awesome, we stopped the bleeding. That person's going to be begging you to take that off of them. Think about what you feel like when your hands and your feet are cold, or when you woke up in the middle of the night and you realize that somehow you fell asleep like this, and you're like, oh, I gotta pee, and you can't move your arms, or you're trying to walk and your foot, that's how that's gonna feel on top of your injury. And so people are gonna be uncomfortable. And so it's your job as the attending layperson or medic, whatever you wanna call yourself, the helper, the first care provider is what we like to call, because you truly are the first care provider, especially out here. you got to talk them down. You got to talk them through it, you know? Just having that conversation and calming people down goes so far. And so now we have this applied. This person's panicking. I'm talking them through it, calming them down. Whatever I have to say to get them nice and calm. We've got somebody calling for help. Do we have a rig that can drive them out? Am I on a dirt bike? Am I walking? Do we have a 4-wheel drive rig that can get them out? Do we need a helicopter because it rolled and now we can't get it started and I was the passenger and we're by ourselves? How do I get into that? Or how do I get out of that? So if somebody's got an atrial or an arterial bleed, that needs to be on the top of your priority, especially if you can't get this stopped. Now, one of the issues that I think with this one, a lot of people like it. The military loves it. I think it's great too. But one of the issues that makes me nervous is that you don't want this to ever come loose, okay? And so now if I tighten this down, the pressure is gonna hold it in there, right? The last thing I want to do is think about this for the next 3 hours trying to get this person out. So if you look at some of these SOFs, sorry.
That wasn't tight.
This one here actually has a triangle on it, okay? And I'm not telling you one's better than the other. That locks in there and it doesn't come off. It's actually really hard to get off. You put it on yourself and you're like, I really want this thing off right now. And then you regret putting it on and you're fumbling with it and you're like, oh, this hurts. They do that for a reason, because you could be unconscious and now we're moving you. Your arm gets hooked on something. And now all of a sudden that comes loose, it opens up, that person's already unconscious, or maybe they're conscious, they don't realize it, and now they start bleeding again. And so that's why they make it hard to get off, and you want that to be locked in and not moving. So we get the tourniquet set, it's locked in, it's not moving, and if you can splint the arm, these have SAM splints, you can use this. You can use anything hard that you have and tie it up. I'm not going over splinting, I was told to keep it to bleeding control, but we can talk about splinting a different time. But splint the arm, keep it immobilized, you don't want it to move, especially if you have a fracture. Because think about how sharp bone is, and now all that bone is moving. Yeah, you just stopped the arterial bleed, awesome. But now we've got all that bone moving, and it's just like saws in there, just destroying nerves and other tissue and all that. So we want to keep it steady. Also, I want to look and be able to see where the wound is, because I want to be able to watch it. They called this an intervention. I intervened in something that was life-threatening, and I made a difference, and I changed it. So I'm going to check my interventions. I want to make sure that what I did is still working. It's making a difference. So I want to be able to see that, so I don't want to cover it up. The other thing is, if this person goes on a helicopter, you're probably not going with them. Sorry. Although that might be cool to ride in a helicopter, you're not going to go with them. So you want to make sure that it's open, so when the medic gets there, or the trauma doctor, whoever sees it, they're going to know exactly where it is. And if you have the forethought to think, I'm going to put the time down, awesome. You can write it on their forehead, you can write it wherever you want where it's visible, what time you actually put that on. So they have a reference. Okay, this thing's been on for 4 hours, this thing's been on for 10 hours, this thing's been on 20 minutes. And that allows them to figure out, okay, when we open this up, when we start doing surgery, they can make better decisions on the medicines that they're going to give you. Okay, so direct pressure should stop bleeding. If it's slowing down, awesome. I'll throw an ACE bandage around it, an Olaze bandage, and I'll do a pressure dressing. And you want to put pressure right over the wound and push down on it. It doesn't feel good, but you got to stop the bleeding. You put that through and you go, oh man, that's still bleeding through pretty hard. We got an issue here. I think we're way out in the country, in the back country. I should probably put a tourniquet on and make a phone call, or get on the ham radio. Or you stop it and you slow it down a little bit, let's say. You don't stop it, you slow it down, and then maybe you can put more bulky dressing on top of it. Just never take it off. Would you mind grabbing some more chairs? Is that cool? Never take the tourniquet off, ever. Once you put it on, it stays on, okay? And don't take off a dressing that you've already put on, okay? Those are real simple. Your goal is to stop the bleeding, keep the blood in the body. Again, think of it like a domino effect. You want to stop that domino. That first domino already fell. And so we stop the domino, we keep it warm. Am I okay? We keep them warm, and by keeping blood in them, and then putting a blanket over them if you need to, which is nice. So we'll talk about the warming too. And so let's talk about, any questions on that before we move on to the thing? Next step. Direct pressure, we're good on that. We're good on tourniquets. Again, after my hour spiel, You know, we can go through it, or if we have time, we'll go through it. You guys can be on camera and smile and feel uncomfortable like me. Wound packing, not gonna be fun. Life-saving, person's probably gonna be unconscious. Real quick, what I didn't talk about is, what if somebody's got an abdominal wound in their stomach, in their side, in their chest? Well, you can't put a tourniquet on that, right? And you can't pack it. I mean, I guess technically you could put something in there, right? But packing that wound, you don't have enough gauze to go in there, and you don't know where the injury is. So you're not gonna pack the wound. Sometimes people just, it's not their day. But what you can do for an abdominal wound is you can take bulky gauze, you can take this abdominal pad. I'm gonna open it up. He's gonna take it out of my paycheck. It's okay.
You won't. It's part of training.
It's a part of training. He'll write it off, tax write-off. You can take this, fold it in half, fold as many times as you want, and just put direct pressure on it, okay? And then when you do that, you opened yourself up. And so if you can take plastic, that's what I like about this, you can just take this right off of it. You've got everything you need, boom, right there. And you cover it up, you keep the heat in, you keep debris out, and you keep everything that's supposed to be inside there, in there. Now let's say somebody took a handlebar, somebody took a rock, somebody took a stick, and everything that's supposed to be in there maybe isn't in there and it's kind of coming out. Don't put it back, just cover it up. Cover it up the best you can, and then take one of those ACE bandages, wrap it around them nice and tight, make sure that they can breathe, and now you've got everything in that should be in, hopefully. Nothing else coming in there, water, dirt, anything like that, and it shouldn't be spilling out anymore. Okay, we've stopped that. You gotta get them out, okay? Any major injuries to the head, the neck, the torso, and anything spurting, your thought should be, especially if you're a trail leader, or you're with a loved one, or maybe somebody that you kind of like, get them out. Get them out right away. So we try to think of it like, oh, nice and slow, or beat feet, I'm gonna move fast, or we're calling a helicopter. The joke is, do your ABCs, arrive, bewilderment, chopper, go. You can do that too. But, yes?
You mentioned sticks and stuff
Yep.
like that. If it's just in them, like not through or anything,
Yep.
do you ever remove that?
Good question. Yeah, it's a great question. There is one time that you ever remove something from somebody, and that is if it's actually stopping them from breathing. That's it. Breathing. So you've got something that's in their throat, even in their mouth. If it's going through their mouth, they can still breathe, you know. But otherwise, if something's in there, don't pull it out. But no, once something's in, you don't ever want to remove it, because it's in there. Instantly your body realizes that there's a problem. What's it gonna do? It's gonna instantly try to stop the bleeding, and it's gonna try to cushion everything. You get an injury, it swells up. It's protecting itself. And so you're gonna start swelling, and you're gonna start clotting. So don't break those clots, leave that in there. And you can take all these dressings, these fancy bulky dressings like this, and you're just gonna put it around it. You're gonna surround it, try to keep it from moving. That's it. Good question, I'm glad you brought that up. Any other questions? Abdominal wounds. Okay. Let's talk about opening the airway. Let's talk about opening the airway. And with the airway, we'll talk about chest problems and injuries to the chest and thoracic cavity. So you find somebody, you're walking along, and they're unconscious. The first thing I'd like to do is, well, are they bleeding everywhere? Do I walk up and I see a giant pool of blood? I should probably figure out where that's coming from and stop that. We already talked about that. Tourniquets, direct pressure, packing the wound. If they're not bleeding everywhere and they're unconscious, are they breathing? I shouldn't have to, teach people how to see if somebody's breathing. You guys should be able to figure that out. We're good. But I will say that if you're in the snow, you're gonna have to look for a while because everything slows down, right? So you may not be able to feel a pulse for a while. They may start breathing slower, all that stuff, because your body basically trying to protect itself, and it slows everything down. I need to open their airway. And so you have a couple different ways to open their airway. You can decide, does it look like they fell out of off a rock or off an ATV or off a dirt bike? Did they hit their head? If you're not sure, don't tilt their head back. You can just lift their back of their jaw here and lift them up. And if you're it's called a jaw thrust. If you're not comfortable with that, roll them over on their side. To the lay people who are not teaching, true EMT school and paramedic school, roll them on their side. It's called the recovery position, okay? So, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a car accident and people come out and they got the big collar on and then they're on that board. Has anybody ever been on one of those boards? No, we're the only ones? Oh, you've been on one? How awesome are they?
I was life-flighted, so.
Okay, so you have no idea, but they worked out for you. Most of the time, people who are on the boards are very uncomfortable. And interestingly enough, thanks to the litigation that happens in this country, we couldn't do the studies here. And so it happened in Thailand because they don't have the same issues. Hopefully I'm not offending any attorneys. But that's kind of what happened. And the doctors looked at these studies over the years and they said, man, when somebody injures their C-spine, it's happened there, like at that point of injury, at that point of impact. It's not afterwards. Because I remember looking at that and moving people around, and I'm like, man, we're moving these people around. I don't think that this board is really doing what it's supposed to do, but okay. And we'll still do that to move people around and help lift them up when they're unconscious. But what they found was if that injury has already happened, you're most likely not going to make it worse. So when somebody's awake and alert, their body is going to instantly kind of tense up, and you go, you know there's something wrong. You're like, all right, I'm going to try to protect myself here. But if they're unconscious and you roll them over on their side, if anyone's maybe had a few too many or knew someone that had a few too many, never stay on your back, right? Roll them on their side. And that's really what that is. Somebody has a medical emergency, a seizure, or somebody is unconscious from trauma. When you roll them on their side, it does a couple things. One, gravity is going to take any blood or any sputum or anything like that, it's going to let it drain out. And it's also hopefully going to move that tongue forward a little bit and keep it out of the way so they can breathe. I would encourage you not to stick your fingers in somebody's mouth, ever, because you don't know when they're going to wake up and you don't want to lose a digit. And that, it does happen. If you want to shove something in their mouth, you're rolling the dice. So I'm encouraging it not to be your finger. But if you put them in the recovery position and you allow that to kind of flow out, now you've essentially allowed them to breathe, and hopefully that they're breathing and that any kind of liquid is not choking them and they're not going to die in their own spit. So recovery position for a layperson is fantastic. And when it comes to that, I guess I usually talk about the Good Samaritan law first, but I didn't. So we'll just roll right into that, because you walk up to somebody and you go, I mean, I don't want to touch this person because I don't want to, get blamed for this. Like, what if I make this worse? What if I pull them out of the car and all of a sudden they say, well, it was me that did that? You're covered under something called the Good Samaritan law. So that means that you're trying to help. You're trying to do the right thing and help this person out. They're not going to, they can try to come back and sue you, but you're actually protected under that law. And each state has their own Good Samaritan laws, and they're all a little bit different. But for the most part, if you're trying to help somebody and roll them over into the recovery position, you're good. Now, if you say, well, I'm trying to help that person, and you actually took a rock and you bashed them in the head, and you said, I thought their blood pressure was a little high, and I wanted to relieve it, you're not going to be covered under the Good Samaritan law. So it's got to be something you're doing that's trying to help the person, that a person of your training level, which could be nothing, which is fine, is going to do the same thing. Now, for me, if I did something and I did something wrong, they're going to look at Jessica and say, well, would you have done that? Oh, you wouldn't have done that? Well, he should know better. Why would he do that? And now I can get hemmed up. I can get in trouble for that because I should know better. I'm trained to a different level. But as a layperson, that covers you, and that allows the first care provider, you guys, to go out and actually make a difference. As the reality is, when something happens, even in the urban environment, it takes us time to get there. Sometimes it takes us a good 8 minutes, sometimes longer, and it depends on where you live, but if there's a wildfire, you're in trouble. I don't know if you guys know, Colorado Springs had a huge wildfire a few years ago, and it burned a lot of that city up. And they had fire trucks and ambulances coming from all over the state, just trying to cover. And so you're calling 911 because you have a true emergency. You don't know how long it's going to take for somebody to get there. And so I'll talk to somebody that's got kids. I have kids, and most of the days, sometimes they make me mad, but most of the time, I will do whatever it takes. I will take a bullet. I will do whatever it takes to make sure that they are okay. If they're sick, I want to be sick, not them, right? I'm going to do all that in my mind. I would do all that, right? And I would take care of them, but I'm not going to learn how to stop their bleeding. I'm not going to learn how to clear their airway. I'm not going to learn to stop them from choking. These are all things that I think everybody should know and that everybody can do, and that is pretty simple. There's no voodoo magic. You don't get a wand at the end of this. It's very simple stuff. So we talked about opening the airway. The recovery position, I think, is great. It's not just me, because I'm kind of nobody, but lots of doctors and people that are much smarter than me. The people who write the trauma protocols for the entire country say that that's a great thing to do, especially for a layperson. And we'll talk about your stick real quick. Let's say that we do have a puncture wound right here. Well, what do we do? You're not going to pack it, right? We talked about doing that. You're not going to shove a bunch of gauze in there because you don't have enough, one. And two, just think about the anatomy of that. There's stuff in there that needs to do things, and we don't want to stop that from happening. And so how do we keep that from happening? You need something called an occlusive dressing. So to occlude something, right, to stop stuff from going through. So it's not permeable. It's plastic. This works here.
Trash bag.
Yeah, trash bag, whatever you have. There's all kinds of stuff in here. The wrappers work great. And actually, Travis does have chest seals that he sells, which are actually pretty slick. The commercial chest seals are nice because they already stick. These don't stick. So now you're trying to like tape this down. And again, your motor function is going to be off. And there's probably going to be some fluid there that's not going to want to stick. The commercial chest seals I've used quite a few times. And you wipe it off and go, and you're done. And it lets the air out itself. You don't really have to worry about it. Again, what are you going to do if you intervene? You watch your patient, the person you're helping, you're going to watch them. And if you put that on there and they get better, sweet. They're breathing easier. They've got a pulse. I'm talking to them. They're awake now. And all of a sudden they go, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. All you got to do is take the sticker off. They're going to start breathing better because the pressure in there is going to push that open. And then they're going to say, oh, man, I'm having a hard time breathing. Put the sticker back on. That's it. This isn't complicated. That's all it is. Sticker on. I feel better. I don't feel so good. Sticker off. Oh, okay. I feel better. Wait a minute. I don't feel so. Sticker back on. That's all you got to do. It's very simple. Yeah, that's somebody takes something to the chest. And you'd be surprised. It's interesting. Like, if somebody takes something here, your diaphragm actually runs up like this. And so if that punctures that diaphragm, even though they got something here and they puncture that diaphragm, you could have an issue down here and you don't realize it. And I would tell you, look for the air coming out of it. You're not going to remember that, and that's okay. And honestly, the last time I had the one, I didn't see that happening. I could see everything else in there that I wasn't supposed to see, but it wasn't like TV. And a lot of times it's not going to be like TV. So stopping bleeding is number one. We're going to make sure that they've got that chest is intact, their abdomen is intact. And it's simple stuff. You're going to take that shirt off and look. If they're awake and alert, don't take the shirt off. Ask them, right? I'm going to say that. I would hope that everybody would do that, but ask them. Don't just run up and be like, I know that you rolled your ankle. I'm single, by the way. And I sat through a bleeding control class. Let's do this. Don't do that. Talk to them and say, hey, listen, are you injured? And if they are making sense to you, okay, cool. I'm going to call them a reliable person. What hurts on you? If they're unconscious or they're not making sense, you're going to have to do work. You're going to have to get in there and say, why are they unconscious? If they're bleeding a lot, hopefully you're going to see it in their shirt and you'll be able to go to that spot. If they've bled a lot and maybe they're wet and it's raining, you may not see it. There's a lot of different factors because it's never this sterile environment that we're teaching you in. It's like this beautiful thing that's like Disneyland is what I call it. Like, oh, this paramedic Disneyland. It's anything happens that you want to happen. It doesn't work like that. It's always, it's pitch black. Everyone's exhausted. Nothing, Murphy's there laughing at you. There's Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And you're trying to help that to not happen and he's just laughing at you. And so being familiar with your equipment, being familiar with what your capabilities are and understanding your shortcomings, and then maybe getting some training and filling those shortcomings in so you can perform if you need to, is huge. And now you guys have the equipment to do that. And so we talked about opening the airway, recovery position. I would encourage you, anybody who's unconscious and they're not dead, to roll them in the recovery position. Obviously we talked about stopping the bleeding.
We talked about improved breathing already.
Talked about improved breathing. Position to keep warm. So, what's that last one there? provide psychological support. Psychological support is huge. But let's talk about keeping people warm and positioning. And so what's the recovery position? To the side, arm underneath, and basically this is kind of like a kickstand, right? Yeah, I kind of want to just lay on his stuff. Do you want to do that? Just lay on top of it? Let me move my knife before we actually have an injury. So Jessica's going to show you the recovery position. It's super slick, it's super easy. I think where people struggle is it's very uncomfortable to do this in the first place, to touch anybody. And so kick that one, yep. So that leg is like a weight. It's gonna keep you forward. You got a kickstand here. Everything's gonna run out. You can throw this arm forward if you want. You can leave it there, it's up to you. I usually just kind of throw it like this under the chin. If you can do that, it may not stay. But your goal is really this. You don't have to be a recovery position guru. You just have to look at it and say, okay, gravity is gonna go this way, I'm good. That should be your biggest concern. How do I get gravity to work for me? Because I may have to walk away from this person for a little bit. I'm not gonna be able to babysit them. What if I gotta go get help? And so you wanna be able to do that. And they're not maintaining their airway, which means they don't have a gag reflex. All that is gonna go down to their lungs, and they're gonna what's called aspirate, and then they can drown in their own fluid, which would be terrible. So you can leave them like that, and you can move forward. And while they're like that, let's say they lost a lot of blood. And if you remember earlier, I was talking about what happens when you lose blood, that domino effect, your clotting factor goes down. So right away, when you get a cut, your body does two things. It realizes you're injured, and it starts swelling to protect you. You can get up, unless you're comfortable.
I am
Comfortable staying out there. Your body starts to clot right away, and it says, I've got to stop this. I got to keep as much blood in here as possible. And then it swells, and that kind of helps that clotting. But when you're cold, your clotting factor just dumps. It goes down because your body is freaking out. And we won't get into the science of it, but the reality is what can we do to stop that? What can we do in the backcountry? What can we do in an urban environment? What do we do on a fire engine or a fire truck or an ambulance? Keep them warm. And so what do you have to do that? You have an emergency blanket. You have maybe a tarp. You have a sleeping bag. Yeah, you can open that up if you want. It's just,
I have extras.
oh yeah, sure. It's just a big old thin reflective blanket. And the goal is to keep that body heat in. If you actually go into, if you've ever been to a trauma bay, you probably have, but you don't remember it. It's crazy hot in there. Every time I go in there, it's always, you're already hot because you all have all your stuff on, and you walk in and you're like, oh. Well, they do that because they want the patient to be warm, and that patient's not gonna have clothes on to keep them warm because they've got to fix everything, right? Keep them warm. The clotting factor is huge. Your body wants to survive. It wants to do what it needs to do. We just have to do a couple things to help it do that. Keeping the blood in, that's it right there. Keeping the blood in, which is hugely important, not just, blood is great, but what does it do? It transports oxygen, right? And that's really what we need, it transports oxygen. What they used to say is, give them a bunch of fluid. The answer is give them an IV. Well, the problem is IV fluid doesn't transport oxygen. And so all this stuff that seems really complicated really is very basic, and the layperson can get stuff situated where somebody like me walks up and I go, awesome. You were here maybe 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 2 hours before me, and if you didn't do what you did, this person would be dead. I've actually said that quite a few times in my career where I'm, like high five, good job. It's because they weren't afraid to get in, they had half of an idea of what to do, and they made it work. And everyone here can do that, and you just have to, like I said, figure out what equipment you have, which you really have everything you need now, for the most part, and then be able to figure out how to use it. So we keep them warm. So head and feet, right? I would say cocoon them, okay? But here's the other thing is, remember I said you gotta be able to look at your injury? So if you cocoon somebody up, have a forethought of, okay, this is the side that's injured. I wanna kind of leave this is where my seal is, where I'm gonna wrap it. I don't wanna put this side down, and now I'm like, I'm moving them around. Maybe that tourniquet that I put on wasn't a commercial tourniquet. I did the best I could, now that came loose. Now you've got a problem, and now you've been there for an hour and it's dark, and don't do that to yourself. Go ahead and get yourself situated where you can access that because you wanna keep an eye on it. And keep them warm, and the body will do what it needs to do. So, any questions about stopping bleeding? Direct pressure dressing, tourniquet if you have to, yes.
The
for a torso cut.
You pack it, or you push gauze in there?
No,
No. So if it's on the torso, it's all gauze only on the outside.
correct. Yep, and then you want to see, are they struggling to breathe? So basically, if it's in their rib cage and it's all the way through, and you'd be surprised how much it takes to get in there. And you can watch it. You can actually put your hand over it if you want, and maybe even feel some pressure. If you start feeling some air and some pressure, right away in your head, you're like, ooh, that's not good. I'm not gonna move my hand. And at that point, you're thinking to yourself, how do I put a sticker on this person? How do I get this closed? We're all enclosed for a reason, right? That's your goal. So the only places you pack are your junctions. So just think about your junctions here and here. That's really it. And you're not supposed to pack the head as well.
And the neck is you consider part of the torso?
Yeah, so don't pack. All you're gonna do is put direct pressure on it and hold it tight. And so you have arteries on both sides and you have veins on both sides. So hopefully it's not through both sides. And like I said, sometimes people just have a bad day.
So this is for a cut, like not a stick,
Like a slice, direct pressure.
Okay.
Yep, direct pressure. That's all you gotta do. And you're gonna have to push it on there hard. Now here's the question. What do I do after direct pressure? Well, direct pressure is not stopping. Do I put a pressure dressing on it? Do I put a tourniquet on it? What side of the neck do I put the tourniquet on? And am I a beneficiary of their life insurance policy? These are the things that you're thinking of. Have I checked their wallet? Don't do that, I'm kidding. It's direct pressure with the neck. The neck is a funny thing, because you're worried about a lot of stuff. You have huge vessels in there that have to perfuse your brain. Yeah, you save the body, but now they're brain dead. Which you can look at two ways. Hey, I did the best I could, and now we've got organs to donate to somebody who needs them. Or I failed, and I wish I would have got them, back. I mean, you can only do so much, But that's reality, And this is kind of a harsh reality that if you're not prepared or halfway prepared, it's going to be a rude wake-up call. Especially if you're here hanging out at Cruise Moab, you probably go out there where no one's coming to get you. You're going to have to figure it out. And so that direct pressure on the neck is going to be your biggest thing. And here's the other thing, is that person's awake, have them do it. Hey, hold direct pressure here. And by the way, your life counts on it. Guess who's going to do a good job? They're going to put some pressure on there, okay? Now, if you're in a truck and you're wheeling out, and you can put some stuff up against them and have them lean up against something, you can do that too. But what you don't want to do is crush their airway, right? You don't want to crush their airway. So, did that make sense? Is that cool? Is that good? Okay. Head wound?
Guy got hit on the head with a tree limb.
Okay.
Down in the other place.
Flick rock.
Flick rock, yeah, years ago.
Yeah.
And
Skull squishy or not?
I didn't notice that much. It was,
Okay.
I was a mess. But
Right, yeah.
I got the golf
Totally.
pad and blanket
Yep.
out of the truck and we were there.
Yeah, awesome. Don't shove stuff in it.
Don't shove it, but
Nope.
pressure it.
Yep. Just stick it on there. You don't have to. When I say pressure, you're not pushing hard. You're just gonna push it on there. And here's the other thing: is that has anybody ever cut their scalp? I've got scars. Yeah. Anybody have kids that cut their scalp and you're like, oh, it bleeds a lot. Like it's very vascular, which is the way it's supposed to be in there. So you're gonna have to push on it. As long as that skull, and you'll know if you push on it and you go, oh, that feels like an overripe cantaloupe. This is not good. Versus, oh, I'm putting pressure on it and they're going, ow, that hurts. They're talking to you, that's good. That's super good. Or if they're crying, that's okay. That's good, especially kids. If kids are crying, I'm happy. But an adult, they get hit in the head with a tree limb and you're putting pressure on it and that skull's intact, just leave pressure on it. And when you wrap their head up, you kind of look, you ever see those old pictures of like a Civil War veteran? Because if you've ever done it and you wrap somebody's head like this, wait a couple minutes and it's gonna go whoop, and you're just like, oh, and you put it back on. Oh. And so if you can go low and underneath their occipital region back here, and this fancy little deal here, some people have bigger ones, some people have smaller ones. I actually will come underneath here 1 or 2 times, not too tight because I want them to talk, unless I don't want to hear what they have to say, then I'll do it tighter, and then they can't talk, and that's okay too. And that's actually, just a side note, that's a way that if somebody hurt their jaw, you can actually kind of splint their jaw that way too, which is, side trail, but that will help keep that on. So a couple times around, nice and tight. This acrylics is fantastic for that, because believe it or not, it is a little bit stretchy, and it also is absorbent. And if you got to put a couple Acrylics on, use it. If you need to use more of that, use it. You run out of that stuff and we're still bleeding, you got a t-shirt? Cut your t-shirt around. You start cutting your t-shirt all the way around this way, you're backpacking, guess what you have? A really long roller gauze, a really long Acrylics of cotton. And sweet, this is great. This is gonna absorb, it's kind of stretchy. I can do stuff with it, I can tie it. And especially if you're on foot, weight equals pain. No one wants to carry extra weight because it hurts, right? You think it's a great idea to bring all this extra stuff, and then you get halfway up to where you're backpacking and you're like, oh, that was a bad decision, you know? And so what do I have that I can use for multi-purpose? What we need to have is a way to stop bleeding. We need a way to maybe occlude something on the chest, your back here, or your abdomen, and we need a way to pack a wound. Otherwise, you're rolling them over, gravity's hopefully gonna clear their airway, you're not pulling anything out of them because you're not doing surgery there. Your goal is to get them stabilized and have somebody who knows a little bit more to come in and go, awesome, thank you, good job, high five, and move them. Does anybody have any more questions about that? Bleeding control, tourniquet use, the importance of having a commercial tourniquet versus an improvised tourniquet. And if you don't have a commercial tourniquet, then understanding how to use an improvised tourniquet. High and tight, the blood's not flowing anymore. We did good. Blood's still flowing, we're not doing so good. Put another one just below it. Okay, junction packing here, 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 here. And then we put them in the recovery position. Stickers for their chest, just to not let air through. And as far as nosebleeds go, I know when I was a kid and I had nosebleeds, my parents would be like, lean your head back. And then inevitably, I would vomit. And I would vomit like this gross stuff. If you've ever done it, you know what I'm talking about. So don't do that. You actually have little arteries that run through here, okay? And you have this bony prominence here. And so there's a part where that bone stops, and then you have cartilage that moves around. This is a beautiful nose, as you can see. There's some scars on it, it's been hit a couple times. But what you wanna do is you wanna push here, and you're gonna push hard. It doesn't feel good. And you wanna push hard, you wanna lean the head forward. And you can put something here to catch whatever's coming out still, and you're gonna push that nice and hard. And so blow your nose hard, they blow their nose. You're gonna push here, lean them forward, and that blood, if it keeps dripping out, it's not gonna drip into their stomach. If it drips in their stomach, they're gonna vomit. And now you got, another mess. And especially with a child, they don't understand that, they start freaking out. With an adult, you can explain that to them. But lean them forward. Eventually, hopefully your clotting factor will kick in. If you're taking medications, like blood thinners and whatnot, it's probably not gonna work. You can do that to try to slow it down, but they're gonna have to go to the ER and they're gonna stick up and they're gonna cauterize it and all that good stuff. But at least you made an effort, and hopefully you're not gonna have somebody vomit blood on you. I would also encourage you, if you're ever dealing with somebody and you don't wear glasses or if you have sunglasses, if you could have eye protection on, that's really important. You get blood on your hand, as long as you don't have a cut on your hand, you're good. Just wash it off. But if you get something in your eye, you ain't washing that out. So think about that. Have a way to protect yourself. And during this day, you probably have sunglasses. That's cool. As long as you can see, you're good to go. But try to protect your eyes. So. That's pretty much all I have. I can come up with silly stories. We can talk about some other stuff. But if anybody has any questions, you can answer them now. If you want to come up and actually put a tourniquet on me, or I'll put one on you, yeah, we can make a hole somewhere and show you how to pack a wound. Maybe somebody owes you money, we can do that. But I'd be happy to go over anything that you want to talk about. I'm here all night. So, are you good? Cool, yeah, no problem. Thank you.